Welcome to today's edition of the Post-Gazette Live. Of course, I am Paul Zeise. We do it every day at 5 o'clock. We talk for a few minutes about what goes on in the world of sports. Of course, that in these parts generally means we are going to talk about the Steelers, but actually we will talk about the Steelers a lot in this episode. But first things first. I think there comes a time when some of these sports and some of these salaries just get to be so silly that I don't even know if there's anywhere to go but down. And I've been saying that now for the last 4 or 5 years with respect, especially to baseball. But yesterday, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, when it came down, Juan Soto was going to make $765 million over the next 15 years from the Mets. It makes you wonder, are the Pirates actually ever going to be playing the same sport as some of these other teams? And my answer is I just don't think so. But my other answer is I don't think they want to. That's the other part of it. I think we're at a place where all of the small market owners and all of the teams that are like the Pirates or even the teams that are even in the middle market, I think they're basically content to make money. And baseball continues to make money. And so they're going to continue to allow these kinds of things to happen where, you know what, the collective bargaining agreement will not have a salary cap, and teams will just continue to spend whatever they want to spend. I'm talking about the top teams, and they'll continue to dominate. I mean, it's not really an equitable system. And baseball advocates will tell you, well, there's been a lot of different teams that have won the World Series. But if you look at the playoffs, I mean, for the most part, the rich teams are going to be there more often than not. Does spending money equate with success all the time? No, but it's a lot easier to win when you do spend money than when you don't. And the reason I bring this up with respect to Juan Soto is because I think that if you look at the Pirates right now, they're at a place where they can probably make some money. I mean, make some noise in the National League if they make a few moves. Now, there was some reports about Anthony Rizzo. First of all, I have no interest in Anthony Rizzo. He's old. He's done. And I think that's a big thing from that standpoint. And then the other part of it is I think that they could go out and go get a couple of players, but they're probably not going to. And that's the problem. We're a couple of days into free agency. The Pirates haven't signed or made any moves or even been involved in anybody. You know, they've got a pretty good pitching staff. They need probably one more pitcher. They probably need a couple more relievers. And, you know, there's obviously a big hole at first base that needs to be filled. There's probably a hole in the outfield that needs to be filled. If you're a believer in the two catchers, Joey Bart and Andy Rodriguez, then what are you going to do with Henry Davis? I mean, there's a lot of different things that have to get done with this team. And I'm not even so sure they have a shortstop either. I mean, I think, you know, Kiner Falefa, to me, I think he's a utility guy, not your everyday shortstop. So the fact that the Pirates haven't done a whole lot yet, and they're not even really in on a whole lot of guys, and it doesn't feel like they really want a whole lot of guys. It doesn't feel like they want to go sign guys. It feels like they're almost going to be content to say, well, we have Paul Skeens, and he'll sell a lot of tickets for us, and that's really all we care about. I don't know. That's what I would tell you. That's what it feels like to me. And so, you know, when you see all of these other things going on with all these other teams, the teams that have money, even some of the teams that don't have money. I mean, the A's, who don't even have a city right now, they're going to play temporarily in Sacramento for a couple of years. They actually signed somebody to a pretty big deal. My question for the Pirates and for Pirates fans is, you know what? this team is not that far away. I know that a lot of people thought, well, they weren't very good, and they're not that far away if they make a couple of the right moves, and if their pitching continues to hold up a little bit. I mean, Mitch Keller, you got Mitch Keller. Obviously, you've got Skeens, you've got Jared Jones. You've got a bunch of guys from that were were in Altoona and Indianapolis that were ready to come up and maybe contribute. I mean, it feels like you've got a pretty good pitching staff, and if you do, it just means you've got to make that lineup a little bit better. I mean, O'Neal Cruz has got to continue to get better. Ryan Reynolds has got to continue to do what he does well. They've got to get Cabrian Hayes to hit a little bit more than he did. Nick Gonzalez has got to get better, but they got to go get a first baseman. They need one more outfielder. I'm sorry, they don't have enough in their lineup. There's still too many holes in their lineup. There's still too many outs in their lineup. And I think that's important to note. They need help. And it's very, very frustrating in so many ways that we're starting into the winter meetings and on all this other stuff. And I'm telling you, it feels like the Pirates are going to do what they always do, where they sort of kick the can down the road a little bit, wait till some of the guys, some of the prices drop on some of these guys, and then they go out and sign them, and they're not quite good enough. That's a problem. That's what they've done. That's how they've operated. And I think, when it comes to Juan Soto, I mean, I look at that deal, and I don't know that it's possible for the Mets to get $765 million worth of production out of Juan Soto. And believe me, it's not about what he's going to do. It's not about what he's going to do in terms of hitting the ball or whatever. That's not at all what I'm talking about when it talks about production. I'm talking about when Bryce Harper signed with the Phillies. They sold X amount of tickets immediately, and their attendance went through the roof immediately. That's a return on your investment. I don't know that's going to happen with Juan Soto. I mean, I'm obviously the Mets, but the Mets sell a lot of tickets anyway. My thing is, I don't know that the Mets are going to get their money's worth out of that. But if it's $765 for him, what's going to happen for the next guy that comes down the pike? What's going to happen in a couple of years when Paul Skeens comes up and it's his turn to get paid? What are these contracts going to look like? And there's only a few teams that now, we're getting to the point where there's so much money, these contracts, that we're getting to a point where only a few teams are going to be able to afford them. I mean, it's already almost there. Now you probably still have 10 or 12 teams that can afford big money deals, but these kind of deals, there might only be 3 or 4 or 5 teams that really can afford these kind of deals. So that's what I would tell you is really disappointing. I think when it comes to the Pirates as well, I hope they're not getting ready to go and kick the can down the road and do all the things they do in order to try and not have to pay for the guys they really want. They need to go get the guys they really want. And if it means you have to pay a little bit and spend a little bit of money and add a little to the payroll, well, you need to do that. Now, of course, we're talking about a team that basically, cut a guy this year to save, a few bucks, cut a guy 4 plate appearances before he hit an incentive, which was totally bush league. But my point is, you hope that they're not going to waste Paul Skeens. You've got the best pitcher in baseball. You've got the best pitcher in baseball. You've got, and not only the best pitcher, but he's also the guy who I would tell you is probably the marquee ticket in baseball. People want to see him play and pitch. So I feel like it was important to start here with the Pirates because right now they're at a place where they can make themselves better for next year, and they just don't seem to be willing to do that. Period. They don't seem to be motivated to do that. They don't seem to care enough that they're going to go add players that will help them win. They need to do this and need to do it immediately. Now then, if you saw anything that was going on with the Philadelphia Eagles, who the Steelers play, of course, on Sunday, if you saw any of the stuff that was going on with the Eagles after the game, it's kind of hilarious. Like I said, we are at a place where I think we all understand here in Pittsburgh, if you follow the Steelers, we all understand the fact that these kinds of beefs between a quarterback and a receiver can really be toxic. It can really, really be toxic in a way that it tears a team apart. We've saw it a few times here with some of the receivers that we've had here in the past. So it's kind of refreshing to see that it's another team that's doing it. In this case, it's the Eagles. So in case you didn't see it, the Eagles played the Carolina this week, and really they won, but it was a really ugly win. It was kind of a bad game in a lot of ways. But most importantly, Jalen Hurts only threw for 108 yards in this game or something like that. And after the game, A.J. Brown was talking. And, of course, A.J. Brown said something to the effect of, that basically, the passing game is what the problem is. It is a passing game. Basically, there's not too much conversation between him and Hurts. That Hurts is basically, he was sort of implying that Hurts was the problem, and everything else. That's one of those things where, okay, so Hurts is the problem. It feels like A.J. Brown maybe was throwing him under the bus. And then this morning, or actually it was this morning or it was last night, whatever it was, Brandon Graham, who's a defensive end on the team, decided to basically say that A.J. Brown needs to check himself and that A.J. Brown is a guy who probably shouldn't be talking about accountability, yada, yada, yada. And, of course, then it becomes a full-blown controversy or whatever you want to say. I mean, in Philadelphia, they've got sports talk radio there. And so they've got a lot of people that cover the Eagles. And so it's one of those things where, okay, if that's going to be the case, it's going to blow up. You know how it blew up here when it was Antonio Brown or anybody else that was here. At the end of the day, you kind of knew that it was going to turn into a controversy. Even if it wasn't that much of a controversy, it's going to turn into that. The Eagles, they got themselves together. Of course, Brandon Graham, he decided that he was going to go back on the sports talk radio station, and he was going to basically apologize for his comments and say that he didn't mean anything by it. And then, of course, you've got Nick Sirianni, who basically says, hey, this is not a controversy. A.J. Brown didn't mean it like that. Don't worry about it like that. Jalen Hurts also talked about the fact that, hey, there's nothing wrong with A.J. and I. We'll figure this out. Blah, 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 blah. So it's now one of these things that sort of became a controversy. The Eagles have tried to get out in front of it, but much like when it was the Steelers with Antonio Brown or where, any of these other guys, it's masking a deeper issue, I think. It's masking a little bit of a deeper issue. And that is, if you look at the Eagles passing game, right? And I was looking at this a little bit before, but if you look at the Eagles passing game, it has not been explosive at all. It has not been great at all. In fact, it's been 4 games in a row now. They've been under 200 yards passing. This game against the Panthers, Jalen Hurts was 14 of 21 for 108 yards. Now, he did throw for 2 touchdowns, but the reality is A.J. Brown, of course, is a receiver. He's always open. If you ask him, he, is a guy that's not getting utilized and blah, blah, blah. He had 43 yards receiving. He had four catches. But if you look at the Eagles passing game, it's been a problem. Not really a problem because they're winning. That's, the one thing is you can say whatever you want to say about the stats and the fact that maybe they're not achieving what they want and what they're looking to, to do in the passing game. And maybe they want more from Hurts and A.J. Brown. But by the same token, they are winning. So, to me, the quote unquote riff between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, I think, is non-existent. But the larger issue is, are they connecting on the field? And so far, they really haven't in recent weeks. And that's why the Ravens or the Eagles have played some tight games. This week they played the Panthers, who they should blow out. They played, they struggled with them. They against the Commanders, they only scored a couple, 26 points, I think it was. They had 24 against the Ravens. And so a lot of times these controversies mask something bigger going on. And with the Eagles, it's going to be very interesting to see what their passing game looks like when they play against the Steelers. Because to me, the Steelers have gotten to a point now where even without George Pickens, they were able to score 27 points. Now, will they be able to do that this week? I don't know. I think the other thing is, if they don't have George Pickens for the next 2 weeks, I could easily see them losing to both the Eagles and the Ravens. And at that point, now you're talking about something different with respect to the playoffs. But to me, the three keys or the three issues in this game, number one, can the Eagles get their passing game going? Can they throw the ball with a little bit more regularity and consistency? Or are they still going to have to grind it out on the ground? Now, of course, they've been able to run the ball reasonably well, and that's, a good thing. But the bottom line is it's hard to do that, consistently. And we've seen this around here as well. It's hard to win. Hard to win when you consistently have to grind out every single yard. It's hard to win. And, they averaged 6.7 yards per carry against Carolina. That's really good. I don't think they're going to do that against the Steelers. And if they don't do that against the Steelers, how are they going to move the ball and score enough points to beat the Steelers? So that's number one. The number one thing, the number one matchup, a little thing we look at there, the passing game of the Steelers the passing game against the Eagles against the Steelers pass defense. Right now, it looks to me like the Steelers' pass defense should have an advantage. Now Jalen Hurts runs well, and he's able to, elude things, and he's able to get out of trouble. And so maybe they're not going to be able to sack him as much or have as much pressure on him as they like to. But again, it's not like he's been able to throw the ball all over the field and move the ball and get big chunk plays. He's going to have to be able to do that in order to beat the Steelers, or at least score enough points to give his team a chance to win to beat the Steelers. The second thing, obviously, is George Pickens. Now, he's got some sort of a hamstring injury, and there's a really good chance that he probably isn't going to be able to even play next week against the Ravens. So that would be 3 weeks in a row without him. That puts a lot of pressure on Mike Williams, puts a lot of pressure on Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Pat Freiermuth, puts a lot of pressure on those guys because now they're going to have to step up. And here's the other thing. This weekend, the Browns probably didn't have the luxury of seeing the Steelers, the offense, without George Pickens. There's a lot of film on them from this week without George Pickens, and I'm sure the Eagles will make some adjustments defensively to try and force the Steelers to do things that they, maybe didn't have a lot of success doing without Pickens in the lineup. That could happen as well. So I think that's where we're at with that. It's important to note that I think that George Pickens being held out or whatever, being hurt, I don't think it's a problem right now because you want him healthy for the playoffs. I mean, I think it's clear the Steelers are going to make the playoffs. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think that when you look at the Steelers, now it's a matter of seeding. But if you ask me, would you rather have the 2 or 3 seed or whatever, or the 5, and not be healthy, or have the 4 or 5 seed and be healthy? I'd rather have the 4 or 5 seed and be healthy. I'd like to see the Steelers go into the playoffs with everybody at their disposal. Everybody healthy and capable. And so now, there's a lot of pressure on Mike Williams, because Mike Williams is the guy they brought in to sort of be that vertical guy that gets down the field. They're going to, they brought him in to be that guy. And I think that's the thing we need to see now. Can he be that guy consistently? And I just don't know. I really don't. I think it's important to note that he is a guy who they've been looking at for a month now, and haven't really decided that they want him to be, anything more than just sort of a situational player. Well, now he's going to have to step into a much bigger role, period. And I think that's the key. If he's able to at least stretch the field, it gives them the opportunity. If he's able to stretch the field a little bit, it gives them the opportunity to not have to try and grind it out possession by possession by possession by possession by possession. The Eagles, to me, I do like a power rankings every week in my column. And I actually think the Eagles are probably right there with the Lions. And the other team, I know they lost this week. The other team is the Bills. But I think the thing about the Eagles is they're a pretty complete team. And they can do a lot of different things. And they can beat you in a lot of ways. In some ways, actually, one of the things that's really interesting to me is that in some ways, their passing game is holding them back, but by the same token, they run the ball so well. Maybe that's a part of why they don't pass for a lot of yards. Maybe that's a part of it. They give up some yards they obviously give up some yards on defense, but the one thing they don't do is give up points. In fact, they give up a little bit less than the Steelers in terms of points per game. And so their defense is really good. Their running game is really good. Jalen Hurts is really good. They've got A.J. Brown, and I know that. And of course, I've seen this stat like 55 times this week. But the Steelers haven't won in Philadelphia since like the 60s. I mean, so it's going to be a rough game. There's no question about it. It's going to be a rough game because the Eagles are really good. But I think the Steelers have a good opportunity here. I do. I think this is going to be a game where they're going to be able to have a chance to win in the fourth quarter, which is all you can really ask for. They might lose, but they're probably going to have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. And that's all you really can ask for. I think, honestly, I look at this matchup with A.J. Brown, and it could be kind of interesting to see Joey Porter Jr. if he's taking some strides. We've seen, we saw Jerry Jeudy have some success against them. We obviously saw T. Higgins and Jamar Chase had some success. I mean, we've had a situation where, we've seen Joey Porter Jr. against some of the best receivers. This will be another one where let's see if he's able to show that he's growing and that he can show some growth as a player. And he doesn't get penalties, and he doesn't get, in these physical issues, he doesn't get, beat. That's going to be what's really interesting to me. That's a matchup we all want to watch. Joey Porter Jr. against A.J. Brown, if it happens. And I think that's really important for Joey Porter Jr. too. He just needs to sort of grow and continue to grow and continue to get better as a player. And these are the kind of tests that really I think are going to be important for him. And I feel like that's what we're really looking at is, can Joey Porter Jr. grow and become the corner that they need him to be? Now, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street, Archie's, the home of 87 wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Get down to Archie's on the south side. Tell Archie I sent you. All the games on Sundays, all the games on Saturdays, and of course now we're starting to get into the college football playoff portion of the season and bowl games. So there'll be lots of games on over the next 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. Speaking of which, I had a lot of Pitt fans that were angry because Pitt is going to Detroit for their bowl game. And of course, now we're starting to see players that are opting out for Pitt and players that are opting out for all of these bowl games. And everybody's all up in arms in that. And I'm going to tell you a couple of things. First of all, Pitt has no one to blame but themselves for a couple of reasons. One, they lost 5 games in a row and became a really uninteresting team. They started the season with this newfound offense. They started the season with, an offensive coordinator, who was young and exciting. They started it with a new quarterback, and really they were sort of the talk of the town when they were 7-0. But really they've become sort of a boring team. So there's just not a lot of glamour with them right now because the offense has sort of gotten figured out. The quarterbacks have been hurt. That's number one. Number two, traditionally haven't sold tickets for bowl games, so better bowl games are not going to take them if they don't have to. I've heard people complaining about the El Paso and so the Sun Bowl in El Paso. That's a great place for Pitt to go. They don't need you to sell tickets, and it's one of the games that's actually on at a really good time spot on CBS. There's nothing wrong with that game. People say, well, it's hard to get to. Yeah, but Pitt fans don't really travel anyway. Period. The other part of it is, and this, thing with all these players opting out, but Pitt, forget about opting out. I don't know that they have a quarterback because Nate Yarnell is going to transfer. Eli Holstein, of course, was hurt. He had some kind of injury. It looks like it's going to be one of these younger guys that's going to play. I just don't know exactly what the point of these games are. To me, the fact that all of these guys opt out of these games make bowl season just absolutely almost 100% useless and meaningless. Other than the playoff games, just kind of useless. And so, the fact that Pitt had some guys opt out and don't want to go to Detroit and play against Toledo, I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. Really. I wouldn't want to play in these games. I mean, I would, as a competitor, want to play in these games. But my point is, if I'm a guy that's got an NFL future, I don't know that I want to just work out to go play in Toledo, to go play in Detroit against Toledo when I can work out and get ready for the combine. But I think the bowl system has a problem now, and they've got to figure out how to solve it. The easiest way to solve it is basically really, really simple. Every bowl should start paying players. You want a team to come to your game? What's the incentive? There's enough money floating around college football. You can't tell me that you can't, say, hey, if you play in this game, you get 20 grand or something like that. There's a million ways that they could get that sponsored. Every one of these games has a sponsor. So to me, make it a game, make it a point where you're going to actually start paying players to come. And people say, well, 20 grand ain't enough. But you know what? I think it is. 20 grand is 20 grand. And if you're a kid that's a 4th or 5th or 6th round pick, that's probably going to be, what your signing bonus is going to be, something like that. So you might as well take the 20 grand and get it done. So that to me is how you solve the problem with the Bulls. It really is. You just try and make sure that you pay these guys and you give them some sort of NIL deal so that they go out and they have incentive to play. Because right now they don't have incentive to play. They just don't. And that's a problem. And that's why you're going to continue to see lots and lots of guys who are going to opt out. That's just also why these bowl games are meaningless in terms of trying to figure out what conference is better than another. They're all meaningless, every one of them. So at any rate, tomorrow we'll break down the Steelers even more, and we'll try and make sure that we also touch on Pitt Hoops a little bit, and we will continue to get you ready for the end of the week where the Steelers and the Eagles will play. Mike Tomlin had a funny line about the Whippeal. I thought that was kind of a funny line, talking about how this is an interstate rivalry. The Steelers are representing the Whippeal. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.